More and more women, especially those with children struggling with divorce or suddenly widowed and just barely getting by, are finding that they have to go back to work or find a job for the first time. And some women are just looking to have more fulfilling, productive lives. In fact, as our lifespans expand, we can probably figure on having more than one career in our lives. And because of that, we can look at it as an opportunity to have more than one career. Just think of the possibilities. But where do you start? How do you find your direction? I'm Deborah Koppel, and on my show I have two women who have found their way and are going to share on my show, Woman Talk with Deborah Koppel. Where do you go when you're at life's crossroads? What direction should you take? Sometimes the best road to take is getting help. I'm Deborah Koppel, and I have two guests with me today who do just that. I'm very proud to introduce Eve Madigan, who is Director and Career Counselor at the Career Counseling and Equity Center at the Los Angeles Trade Technical College, which is quite a mouthful. And then we have a former student of Eve's, Rosemary Royal, who is now assisting Eve at the center. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I
It's
appreciate
nice
you
to be
being
here.
here.
Thank you.
Now, Eve, you have a life that is all about helping people find a fulfilling career direction in their life. And you can really relate to where they're coming from because your life wasn't always that directed. Can you share with us a little where you started from?
Sure. Well, one of the things, what we do now in assessment is we really fit round pegs in round holes. And that's a very, very important thing for people to have their strengths and their skills assessed, where I started from. When I was 42, I had been home for years and years. I had 4 children. The youngest one was not quite 5, and my husband was killed. And so for the first time, I had to think about what I was going to do with my future.
So at the age of 42, after strictly being a mother and a housewife, you had to think about raising 4 kids on your own.
Yes.
And you had never worked before.
Well, I had worked when I was younger, but I was a homemaker. That was a career. I made a career out of that. I loved being there, so it was difficult for me to think of making that transition.
And one thing I found interesting in reading up on your background and hearing your story is that when you were a young child, you were told that you were learning impaired and you were kind of thought of yourself...
No, not even that. I was thought to be retarded.
Retarded?
At that point in my life and in history, they didn't know much about learning disabilities, and I didn't process information the way that you do or anyone else does. I have mirror vision, and consequently it took me longer to work through that maze.
Now,
so
mirror vision is dyslexia.
Reversal dyslexia.
Yes.
Total reversal.
And so until you were in your 30s, you went through your life thinking that you were...
Well, I thought I was retarded when I was younger.
And you were treated as such.
Yeah, and I acted as such. As I got older and had successes in my life, I knew I wasn't retarded, but I still thought that I must be very slow because it took longer for me to work through the kind of maze that I'm learning. It's like walking through a house of mirrors, and you have to learn to do that.
So you mainly, like when you got married, you everything was concentrated on your husband's career.
Oh, I put my husband through college.
Yes.
And worked at 2 jobs in San Francisco. And he was very successful, and we were fairly affluent. And So I equated education with success. And when he was killed, I just kind of got myself together and decided that education was going to do it for me. My lifestyle would continue.
And by that time, you realized that you were not retarded.
Oh, I knew I wasn't retarded, but I didn't think I was real sharp. And going to school, going to college for the first time was terrifying.
And that was at the age of 42,
42.
which was very unusual at that point in time. You're 65 years old now, is
Yes.
that right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, yes, that was quite a feat then. And you managed to go to school, still bring up 4 children, and not miss a beat.
And work full time.
And work full time.
I really am a good role model for women because I've been almost anywhere that women could be. I mean, at that point in my life, I was broke. The hospitalization literally wiped us out. I had a home, but I had to pay for it.
And you and your husband had a thriving restaurant business that you
Yes.
had to let go
Yes,
because of that, too.
right. I lost the restaurant. The bills were just staggering. He was killed by a drunk driver, and so it was a really grim time in my life. But maybe that was the kind of thing that it took to motivate me.
Where did you find your strength? Did you have any kind of a support system?
Sitting down at the table every night with 4 children.
That did it.
That will give you the
Yes.
strength to put something on the table.
Because there were no programs like the ones that you and
No.
Rosemary are involved in at
No.
that time.
No, there really weren't.
And so what did you take in school? You took counseling?
No.
And, whoa.
I had Norman Rockwell's studio in Alhambra.
So you were an artiste.
Yeah, I was an artiste. I was going to be, Michelangelo. And so my AA is in art. It took me 2 years to realize I wasn't going to raise a family on art by taking art. So my BA then was in sociology, and I knew I wanted to help. I just kind of had a natural bent. And as I said, I'm really a good role model for women. So my BA was in sociology, and I still didn't have a marketable skill.
Did you find at that time that you were able to counsel other women in your situation, or?
Well, yes, and the most important thing I think was that I realized I made a lot of mistakes, and so I wanted to try to work at something that would allow women to have a little smoother transition than mine was.
So how did you finally get hooked up with the Career Counseling Equity Center?
Well, I went on and got my graduate degree in counseling, and I'm certified nationally, and so I crossed all the T's and dotted all the I's and did all the right things, and was hired at Trade Tech to open a women's center. Trade Tech is a wonderful college with 70 years history, and primarily vocational.
Right here in downtown LA.
Right here. It's a wonderful, wonderful resource. However, 15 years ago, I didn't think a women's center is what they needed, and still don't. So I opened an equity center, and we work with about 47% men in the center. We have become the assessment center for the city and county of Los Angeles.
And what seems kind of different with what you're doing there is you're not just trying to match people with careers. You put them through a whole process of especially building self-esteem.
Yes.
And how do you go about doing that?
Well, when we write proposals, and we are totally soft-funded, that means that we are not institutionalized. No money comes to us from the school.
You depend on grants that you go out and...
Right. We write grants, and the one objective that I always write is that we will raise the self-esteem by 50%, and we do that.
Guarantee that.
How do we do that? We do that through assessment. When you assess people's strengths, and they learn what all their strengths are, instead of assessment has always been used to screen you away from things. You want to become a cop. You go in and you take the MMPI, and they say, you're psychotic. You can't have any of that. We don't do that. We assess for purposes of identifying strengths.
Right, so it's done in definitely a more positive way.
We use mostly family therapists and psychologists for our case managers because people identify with what they do, and if people are unemployed or if their careers are threatened, their identity is threatened and eroded.
Now, since you've been there, you've developed a lot of programs, and for both men and women. But what I found interesting was that you have developed a lot of programs that are strictly geared towards women. You've felt a need to separate men and women. And could you elaborate on that a little?
Yeah, and I carried a women's studies minor all through grad school, so women have always really kind of been my directional bent. But about 7 years ago, I started teaching men's classes. I first taught men and women together and tried that twice in what we call the VIP class, the Vocational Improvement Program. It's a 20-week program. It's 4 hours a week. But what I found was that men got what they needed from the class, but women deferred to the men and didn't get what they needed from the class.
So this is kind of a natural phenomenon that's happening there.
Yeah. And I am the gender equity coordinator for our college, and there's no way I could teach women without teaching men. Equity, remember. So I teach men and women, but I teach them separately.
So do you find that the women just seem to just really go gung-ho when they're on their own? And
I think it's more empowering.
Yes, that's the word I was searching for.
Yeah, I think it is more empowering for women who have been socialized to defer to men. And we're getting further and further away from that in our own autonomy, but I still saw it happening.
But you deal with so many women who, like yourself, are having to start out later in life and were brought up with that whole idea. I think that our daughters now are looking to be more independent from men. In fact, sometimes we take it a little too far the other way.
Yeah, those things usually do.
Yes. So tell me, what are some of the other programs you've developed for women at the center?
Oh, we have recently worked with the civil unrest population for the city of Los Angeles and assessed about 1,500 people through that program.
And that helped gain the confidence of some of these people you depend on funding from, that you could really make a difference, because that garnered a lot of attention.
Yes. We have worked with aerospace engineers who were unemployed and assessed them and translated them into environmental engineers. We did the human services part of that. We have had programs for parenting, and it's ethnic parenting that we do. We use a black parent, a black instructor who is a counselor or a therapist to teach black parenting. We use an Asian to teach Asian parenting.
That's interesting. You would have the insight to realize that there are some cultural differences in the...
Well, different cultures taught me that.
Yeah.
The first class that I taught at Trade Tech was an all-black class of women, and they taught me that there were a lot of mores and cultural differences. And Trade Tech now enjoys the status of, demographically, of what Los Angeles will be in the year 2000. We're very, very mixed in our culture and in our center.
Yes. And what are the average, maybe Rose, you could share a little. I think what's interesting about your story is you were a woman who wasn't desperately seeking work. You were successfully married and a mother of a daughter who's now a lawyer. Your husband's a doctor. And I know you were kind of going out on your own, doing a lot of volunteer work and taking classes. But what geared you to go to the Career Counseling Center?
Well, as you said, I was taking classes, and I was constantly doing things that were enjoyable and for self-improvement. And so a friend told me about this interesting class that she was taking, and that she'd been to the first session, and she invited me to join her, and I did. And that certainly was a life-changing experience to do that. I will say that I had not worked officially for 30 years. I had always done my husband's bookkeeping, and I had had several independent businesses through the years. I've been a wedding consultant and party consultant, etc. and just done gobs of volunteer work and always been very, very active with things with my daughter and many, many community activities.
And then at
So then I decided.
the age of 51, was it, when you
Well,
just
about
started
50,
taking
about
the
50,
classes?
right.
You felt like you were at some kind of crossroads in your life.
Well, I was looking for self-improvement, and when I took the class, as I said, it did change my life because it did give me more of a sense of empowerment, and I enjoyed what I was doing, and I was very pleasantly surprised when Eve asked me to join her as part of her team. So this was a big move for me to
And how
decide
did your
to take.
husband feel about all this?
Well, my husband was quite shocked because through the years I had thought about working a couple of times before, but had never done it because he wasn't particular about it. But I think he was pretty open, and he certainly has grown a lot and been very, very cooperative since I've been working, very supportive.
So in that way, I was just going to ask you, how has that changed your relationship with your husband? But
Well, I think it's really enriched our relationship. I believe that it has helped foster more self-respect between both of us, and it's allowed us both an opportunity to grow. And since my daughter was already grown and she had finished school and so forth, I didn't have that responsibility, so it was time for me to do something for myself.
so I'm sure you would encourage other women who aren't feeling like they are forced to find work to maybe seek just finding out what they can do with their lives. And
Exactly. In fact, as we deal with so many women who are what we call re-entry women, and these are women who by definition have not worked for a number of years and are now planning to re-enter the workforce. I'm the perfect example of a re-entry woman.
yes.
And this is one of the reasons that it helps to have people that are role models and have experienced some of the same things that the client is experiencing. It makes a person feel so much more comfortable if they're talking to someone that they know has been there.
Yes. Now, I know you started out in Eve's VIP class.
Yes.
And what exactly do you cover in that? What did
we-
that stand for again? Do you mind repeating?
Vocational Improvement Program. It's a program that I started in 1979, actually, at Rio Hondo College, and it was called the Homemakers Improvement Program, HELP, at that point. But I found that women don't like to be called displaced homemakers or
It
homemakers.
does have a little negative connotation to it.
If they've made that transition in their heads, that they want to change from their current role. And women go through a very interesting phenomena. Women identify, you know, if I put men in this circle and women in this circle here, and said, tell me a little about yourselves, women would say, I'm a wife and a mother and chairman of the board. I mean, that's kind of how they prioritize. Men, on the other hand, would say, I'm a dentist, I'm a carpenter. In 15 years, I've never had a man say I'm a husband and a father.
So they really identify with their occupation.
Yes.
Yes.
And so when a woman has been raising children, and those children are now out of the home, out of the nest, she really does go through trauma. And her identity is eroded just as a man's when he's out of work. And so it's a very interesting time for women. And that's when women so often develop agoraphobia and other debilitating kinds of problems.
You do a lot of counseling through your programs for getting over fears.
Oh, yes. What the VIP is really is, it's a succession of workshops. And the workshops are all the way from assertiveness training to loss. We just had a loss workshop last week, and that's losses of any kind that you're having to deal with. And we do theory.
Because now, I just want to back up a little bit with the loss, because I think that's so important for people to realize that a loss doesn't have to be losing something physical. It can be even, losing your childhood or losing...
Community.
Yes, yes.
Anything.
And a lot of people
is
don't
loss.
realize that they're carrying those losses with them and need to take care of the mourning process with that. So you take people through that.
We take them first through the theory, and then about half of the class is spent, you know, experientially where we talk about personal experiences and etc. A lot of sharing. We work on autonomy. Autonomy is a big word in our class. Women gaining their own autonomy, making good choices in relationships and friendships based on your own autonomy.
I think it's so good to get across that this is the type of thing that is covered, because most people, when they hear about career counseling or school, just
Sounds real dull.
it sounds very dull, but this will help improve your life as a whole.
Oh, yes.
And I just would like our viewers to know that I will have the number and address of the Career Counseling Equity Center at the end of the show, so have your pencils ready. And also to really stress that the center is not funded by, you depend on private donations and grants.
Absolutely.
And this is a wonderful
And it
program.
is a free community service.
Free community service.
It is free. The class as well as our assessment. Well, the assessment amounts to maybe $7. They buy their tests at the bookstore.
And probably the hope is that this type of thing will catch on and start opening up all over the country.
Well, we have to look at careers differently than we ever did. You mentioned earlier that we are changing careers. Occupations are becoming obsolete hardly before we're trained in occupations. People are more cyclical today. My cycle is 3.5 years. It's important to know what the length of your cycle is.
You're talking about like your job cycle.
Yes.
So where do you think you're going from here, Eve?
Well, I'm about 2 years away from retirement, which will mean for me consulting and writing. I'm going to write a book at that point. But it will be a totally different cycle. I have cycled for 15 years within my center, but because I am so autonomous, I'm able to make those changes, just kind of coming to different forks in the road and making changes.
Right.
Our center doesn't even resemble in any way what it was when we started.
Thanks to you and people
And
like
Rosemary.
and the support of other like-minded people. That's just wonderful. Rosemary, I was wondering, how about you? Where do you see yourself going from here?
Well, I'm enjoying the position that I'm in now as Eve's assistant. I have continued to learn and grow. I'm presently enrolled in graduate school and will be through with that in a short while.
Wow.
And that's been a very wonderful growth experience for me. And I intend to remain at the school for a while, and hopefully I'll be taking over when Eve leaves. She's been my mentor, and I have certainly appreciated that. It's so important to have a mentor.
Yes, that's one thing I really wanted to bring across on this show is the importance of mentorship. And you didn't have, or did you have a role model at all?
I had a grandmother who was very autonomous and had been widowed in my entire memory, and was never a third wheel. So I think that was important to me.
Yes, to have that
she was
example.
a very gifted woman and have that example. I don't think we do have many role models. Women also have never been very good at networking, so that's something that we have been learning in the last 10 years. Women helping women instead of competing. We've always been taught to compete with each other. And
so in wrapping up the show, what would be your closing words to the women listening out there, especially women? I know you're geared towards both men and women, but especially the women listening out there.
Well, I think women really need to get a handle on where their strengths are, and know that if you've been home, it's like running a small business. You've got many, many different talents and strengths that transition into the workplace, but you need to go where you can get some help in identifying where your strengths are, how they juxtapose to the careers out there.
And thanks to people like you, there is help out there, and that's one thing I really would like to get across too in closing the show, that there is help. It's never too late. So go out, find support, find a mentor, and just know that your life does not have to stop where you are right now. And thank you all for watching Woman Talk with Deborah Koppel. Thanks, Eve and Rosemary.
You're
Thank you.
welcome.